The whisper started the moment Emma Rodriguez walked through the pristine glass doors of Riverside Preparatory Academy. By lunch period, half the school believed she was a convicted felon. By evening, parents were demanding emergency meetings about the dangerous criminal threatening their children's safety. What they didn't know was that Emma Rodriguez could have broken every bone in Brad Wellington's body before he finished spreading his first lie. But she'd made a promise to herself, never to fight again. That promise was about to be tested in ways that would expose the rotten core of California's most prestigious private school and send shockwaves through the Silicon Valley elite who thought their money could bury any truth. Before we jump back, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning fog rolled across Marin County like a gray blanket, obscuring the sprawling mansions that dotted the hillsides overlooking San Francisco Bay. Riverside Preparatory Academy emerged from this mist like something from a movie set, all gleaming glass and modernist architecture designed to intimidate and inspire in equal measure. The parking lot resembled a luxury car dealership, filled with Tesla Model S sedans, BMW i8 South, and the occasional Porsche that belonged to students who'd received them as Sweet 16 gifts. Emma Rodriguez stood at the edge of this automotive display of wealth, her beat-up Honda Civic looking like a rust-stained intruder among the pristine machines. She'd taken 3 buses to get here, leaving her apartment in Millbrook at 6 in the morning to make the journey across the county to this temple of privilege. The scholarship letter crumpled in her backpack represented 18 months of perfect grades, community service, and essays that had moved the admissions committee to tears. What it couldn't buy her was acceptance among students who measured worth in trust fund digits and family connections. At 17, Emma possessed the kind of quiet intensity that made people step aside in crowded hallways without knowing why. Her movements carried the fluid precision of someone who understood leverage, balance, and the dozens of ways the human body could be controlled or disabled. Compact at 5'6", with calloused knuckles hidden beneath concealer and dark eyes that missed nothing, she'd learned to walk softly through worlds where her presence wasn't welcome. The oversized hoodie and worn jeans were calculated choices, designed to help her blend into the background until she could assess the social terrain. Phoenix had taught her hard lessons about standing out in the wrong places. The underground fighting circuits where she'd earned gas money and grocery funds had been brutal education in reading threats before they materialized. Amateur MMA tournaments had given her trophies and broken ribs in equal measure, along with a reputation that followed her through 3 different high schools. When her father's military pension stopped coming and her mother started working double shifts at 2 different hospitals, Emma had done what she had to do to keep food on the table. The fact that she was naturally gifted at hurting people had been both blessing and curse. That gift had nearly destroyed everything 2 years ago in a warehouse fight that went too far. The memory still woke her in cold sweats, the sound of bones breaking, and the moment she realized she'd crossed a line that champions never crossed. She'd walked away from fighting that night, despite the money, despite the scouts who'd started calling, despite the fact that violence was the only thing that had ever come naturally to her. The promise she'd made to her mother and herself was sacred. Never again would she use her skills to hurt someone, no matter the provocation. Riverside Prep represented a fresh start, a chance to be normal, to excel academically without the shadow of her fighting past. The scholarship covered tuition at the $45,000 per year institution, though it couldn't bridge the vast economic canyon between her world and theirs. Emma had researched every student in her graduating class, memorizing family names and business connections the way she'd once studied opponent fight footage. Knowledge was armor, and she'd learned to dress for battle even when seeking peace. The main hallway buzzed with the kind of casual conversation that revealed vast privilege as background noise. Students discussed weekend trips to Tahoe, internships at their parents' companies, and college applications that were mere formalities when your surname already graced a library or lecture hall. Emma moved through this sea of designer backpacks and cashmere sweaters like a ghost, noting exit routes and gathering intelligence on the social hierarchies that ruled this place more absolutely than any government. Her first period advanced. Chemistry classroom occupied the third floor of the science wing, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of the bay. The lab equipment was newer than anything she'd seen in Phoenix public schools, and the class size was small enough that every student had individual attention from Ms. Walsh, a young teacher who seemed genuinely passionate about molecular structures and reaction rates. Emma chose a seat in the second row, close enough to engage but not so prominent as to draw unwanted attention. That strategy lasted exactly 47 minutes, until Brad Wellington walked into the room with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. Tall, blonde, and built like the Division I lacrosse prospect he was destined to become, Brad possessed the kind of all-American looks that college recruiters and casting directors fought over. His family had donated the wellness center, funded the championship lacrosse program, and maintained a yacht at the nearby harbor club that cost more than most people's houses. Emma recognized the predator's assessment in his blue eyes as he scanned the room, noting new prey with the instinct of someone accustomed to exercising power over others. When his gaze settled on her, she felt the familiar tightening in her chest that preceded violence. Every nerve in her body cataloged potential weapons, calculated angles of attack, and measured the distance between them. These were involuntary responses, muscle memory from years of training that no amount of civilian life could completely erase. Brad's smile was perfect, practiced, and completely empty of warmth as he approached her desk. Behind him trailed his usual entourage, Ashley Kim, whose social media following approached influencer status, Connor Hayes, whose hedge fund family had weathered multiple Sikh investigations, and Sophia Chen, who seemed to exist solely to amplify whatever cruelty the others initiated. They moved like a pack, comfortable in their dominance and secure in the knowledge that consequences were concepts that applied to other people. The introduction was polite on the surface, welcoming even, but Emma caught the subtle probing in. Brad's questions about her previous schools, her family's background, her reasons for transferring to Riverside. Each query was a fishing expedition, gathering ammunition for later use. She answered carefully, revealing nothing that could be weaponized against her, but she knew it wouldn't matter. In places like this, truth was optional when lies served a purpose. The transformation happened faster than Emma had anticipated. Tuesday morning, she was just another new student, navigating the social labyrinth of Riverside Prep. By Wednesday afternoon, she'd become the subject of a whisper campaign, so sophisticated it would have impressed political operatives. The beauty of modern character assassination lay in its untraceable nature, spreading through social media algorithms and group chats like a digital virus designed to destroy reputations. Ashley Kim had started the first thread on a private Instagram story visible only to Riverside students. The post featured a grainy photo, allegedly from Emma's previous school in Phoenix, accompanied by text that read, "New girl has serious anger issues. Friend in Arizona says she got expelled for putting someone in the hospital. Why would they let someone like this around us?" The image showed a girl with dark hair in what appeared to be a disciplinary meeting, though the face was conveniently obscured by poor lighting and strategic angles. The photo was completely fabricated, lifted from a stock image website and edited to look authentic, but truth had never been the objective. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Within hours, the story had been screenshotted and shared across multiple platforms, each retelling adding new details that transformed minor fiction into major scandal. Connor Hayes contributed his own embellishment through a Snapchat post claiming, his sources confirmed Emma had multiple arrests for assault and battery in Arizona. Sophia Chun added family drama, spreading rumors about gang connections and drug dealing that explained how a scholarship student could afford even the basic expenses of attending Riverside. The genius of their approach lay in its indirect nature. None of them directly confronted Emma or made accusations to her face. Instead, they created an atmosphere of suspicion and fear that poisoned every interaction before it began. Students who might have been friendly kept their distance. Teachers who'd shown initial interest in her academic potential began viewing her through a lens of wariness. Even the cafeteria staff seemed nervous when she approached the lunch line, as if expecting violence to erupt at any moment. Emma discovered the extent of the damage during her third-period European literature class when she overheard two juniors discussing whether she was legally allowed to be on campus. "My mom called the school this morning," whispered Rebecca Morrison, whose pharmaceutical heiress family had endowed the library. "She wants to know what kind of background checks they do on scholarship students. Like, shouldn't there be some kind of screening for violent criminals?" "I heard she learned to fight in juvie," added Jessica Park, daughter of a tech billionaire whose apps were installed on half the phones in Silicon Valley. "My cousin in Phoenix says she was part of some underground fighting ring where they bet on teenagers beating each other bloody. Totally illegal, like human cockfighting." The irony wasn't lost on Emma that their fabricated version of her past contained elements of truth, albeit twisted beyond recognition. She had fought in underground circuits, though they were legitimate amateur competitions, not the bloodsport gladiatorial combat they described. She had been arrested once for trespassing when she'd tried to train at a gym that wouldn't admit someone who couldn't pay membership fees up front. The charges had been dropped, but in the telephone game of rumor and gossip, minor infractions became major felonies. By Thursday morning, the administrative response had begun. Emma was called out of calculus to meet with Principal Foster, whose office overlooked the lacrosse fields where Brad Wellington was conducting practice with the casual authority of someone born to lead. The principal's desk displayed family photos that revealed connections to old California money, generations of influence that predated Silicon Valley's nouveau riche but had adapted seamlessly to the new power structures. Principal Foster's approach was diplomatically hostile, expressing concern for Emma's adjustment challenges while making it clear that disruptive influences weren't tolerated at Riverside. The conversation danced around direct accusations, but the subtext was unmistakable: conform, disappear, or be removed. Emma listened with the patience she'd learned from years of dealing with authority figures who'd already made up their minds, noting the careful legal phrasing that protected the school from liability while making their position crystal clear. "We've received several calls from concerned parents," Principal Foster explained, her voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone accustomed to managing crises through careful language. "While I don't give credence to unsubstantiated rumors, we must consider the comfort and safety of our entire community. Perhaps a fresh start at a different institution might better serve your educational goals." Emma recognized the euphemistic exile disguised as helpful suggestion. She also noticed the manila folder on the principal's desk labeled with her name, thick enough to suggest considerable research had been conducted into her background. Someone had been thorough in their investigation, probably hiring private investigators to verify or fabricate whatever evidence supported their narrative. Money bought many things, including alternative versions of reality when convenient. The meeting concluded with Emma being assigned to mandatory counseling sessions with the school psychologist, ostensibly to help with her transition difficulties, but realistically to document any concerning behaviors that might justify future disciplinary action. She was also informed that any physical altercations, regardless of circumstances, would result in immediate expulsion. The message was clear: they were baiting her. creating conditions where defending herself would provide the excuse they needed to eliminate the problem she represented. Walking through the hallways after that meeting felt like moving through enemy territory. Conversations stopped when she approached, resuming in excited whispers once she passed. Phones appeared in hands with suspicious frequency, recording her reactions for later analysis and entertainment. The isolation was systematic and thorough, designed to break her psychologically since they couldn't challenge her physically without risking exposure of their own vulnerabilities. Emma's training had taught her to recognize ambush tactics, and this was psychological warfare conducted with the same strategic planning she'd seen in military documentaries about her father's deployments. The objective wasn't immediate destruction, but gradual erosion, wearing down her defenses until she either struck back violently or simply disappeared from their world entirely. Either outcome served their purposes perfectly, confirming their narrative about dangerous outsiders who didn't belong among civilized society. The digital assault intensified throughout the week. Anonymous social media accounts appeared with increasingly detailed, first-hand testimonies about Emma's alleged criminal history. Photos of genuine Fight Club injuries circulated with captions claiming they showed her victims' conditions after encounters with her. The sophistication of the operation suggested adult involvement, possibly hired professionals skilled in reputation management and character destruction. Most insidious was the campaign's effect on the few students who might have offered genuine friendship. David Park, a quiet junior who'd shown interest in studying together, began avoiding her after his parents received anonymous emails detailing Emma's supposed violent tendencies. Maria Gutierrez, another scholarship student who understood the challenges of economic disparity, distanced herself when rumors suggested associating with Emma could jeopardize her own precarious position at the school. By Friday afternoon, Emma had become a pariah without ever throwing a punch or raising her voice in anger. The beautiful efficiency of their destruction impressed her even as it infuriated her. They'd weaponized her own reputation for self-control against her, counting on her restraint to prevent the very violence they claimed to fear. Every moment she didn't explode in rage served as evidence of hidden menace, proof that still waters ran dangerously deep. The week culminated in an incident during physical education that would shatter the fragile peace Emma had been desperately trying to maintain. Coach Barnes had built his career on the foundation of willful blindness, perfecting the art of seeing only what served his interests. For 12 years, he'd overseen Riverside Prep's athletic programs with the kind of selective vision that kept wealthy donors happy and problematic incidents buried in forgotten filing cabinets. His philosophy was simple: winners deserved protection, and winners were defined by their family's ability to fund new gymnasiums, not their character or conduct. The Elite Fitness Center showcased the latest in exercise technology, from Olympic grade weightlifting equipment to virtual reality training systems that cost more than most teachers' annual salaries. Glass walls offered panoramic views of the lacrosse fields and tennis courts, creating a fishbowl environment where every interaction was visible to multiple audiences. Emma had hoped to blend into the background during the mandatory fitness assessments, completing the required exercises without drawing attention to her obvious physical capabilities. That hope evaporated the moment Coach Barnes announced they'd be doing sparring demonstrations for the self-defense unit. His voice carried the casual authority of someone accustomed to staging entertainment for his own amusement, oblivious to or unconcerned with the potential consequences of putting trained fighters in controlled combat situations. Emma felt her stomach drop as she recognized the trap being constructed around her with bureaucratic precision. Brad Wellington's volunteer enthusiasm seemed spontaneous, but Emma read the choreographed nature of his eagerness. This was planned. Theater designed to create the exact situation everyone had been anticipating since the rumors began circulating. The other students formed a loose circle around the designated sparring area, phones discreetly positioned to capture whatever drama was about to unfold. Even students who'd previously ignored gymnasium activities suddenly found reasons to pay attention. Since Rodriguez here apparently has some martial arts background, Coach Barnes announced with the kind of smirk that suggested he knew exactly what buttons he was pushing. "Why don't we see what she learned in those Phoenix training facilities?" The phrasing was carefully neutral on the surface, while loaded with the subtext of everything the rumor mill had fabricated about underground fighting rings and juvenile detention centers. Emma tried to deflect, suggesting alternative demonstration. Partners are offering to help with equipment setup instead. Her reluctance only seemed to fuel Coach Barnes' determination to proceed with his original plan. "Come on, Rodriguez," he continued with mock encouragement. "This is just basic self-defense techniques. Surely someone with your experience can handle a friendly demonstration." The word experience carried particular venom, encompassing all the fictional criminal activities that had been attributed to her throughout the week. Emma realized she was caught between impossible choices: participate and risk revealing the extent of her actual fighting skills, or refuse and confirm the narrative about her being either cowardly or dangerously unstable. Either response would be twisted to support whatever conclusion served her tormentor's purposes. Brad stepped into the sparring circle with the confident swagger of someone who'd never faced genuine physical threat. His lacrosse training had given him size and strength advantages, but Emma could see the fundamental weakness in his stance, the telltale signs of someone who'd learned aggression without discipline. Years of elite athletic training hadn't taught him to recognize genuine danger, because genuine danger didn't exist in his carefully protected world. "Don't worry," Brad called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'll go easy on you. We wouldn't want anyone getting hurt accidentally." The comment drew scattered laughter from his supporters while creating plausible deniability for whatever followed. He was establishing himself as the reasonable participant, protecting a volatile opponent from her own destructive impulses. Emma entered the circle with every muscle fiber screaming warnings about the situation she was being forced into. Her training had taught her to avoid exactly these scenarios, where winning meant losing and losing meant confirming opponents' preconceptions. The smart move was to absorb whatever punishment came and demonstrate restraint, but every instinct, honed through years of competition and survival, rebelled against such passive acceptance. Coach Barnes explained the basic parameters of the demonstration, emphasizing safety and control while making it clear that he expected an entertaining show for the gathered audience. His instructions favored Brad's size advantage, focusing on techniques that played to brute strength rather than technical skill. Emma noticed how the rules seemed designed to limit her options while maximizing opportunities for her to be overpowered or embarrassed. The initial engagement confirmed Emma's assessment of Brad's capabilities. He moved with the kind of aggressive confidence that worked well against other privileged athletes, but revealed fundamental gaps in defensive awareness. His attacks were telegraphed, his balance compromised by overcommitment, and his recovery slow enough that Emma could have countered with devastating effect. Instead, she absorbed his attempts at takedowns and grappling, allowing him to feel successful while avoiding any displays of her actual skill level. The strategy backfired when Brad interpreted her restraint as weakness rather than control. Encouraged by what he perceived as easy dominance, he began escalating his aggression beyond the demonstration's supposed safety parameters. His holds became tighter, his throws more forceful, his attitude more openly contemptuous as he played to the crowd of students recording every moment. Is this really the best Phoenix's underground fight scene could produce? Brad taunted between techniques, loud enough to ensure maximum humiliation. Maybe the stories were exaggerated. Maybe she's just another scholarship fraud who talks tough but can't back it up when it matters. Emma felt the familiar ice-cold focus descending over her consciousness, the mental state that had made her nearly unbeatable in legitimate competition. Every pressure point, joint lock, and striking surface on Brad's body became highlighted in her awareness like targets in a tactical display. The 17 different ways she could end this confrontation in under 10 seconds played through her mind with clinical precision, each more devastating than the last. Coach Barnes watched the escalating aggression with the detached interest of someone enjoying free entertainment. When Brad's latest takedown attempt drove Emma's shoulder hard into the gymnasium floor, drawing gasps from students who recognized the potential for serious injury, the coach's only response was to remind them about maintaining control while making no effort to enforce his own guidelines. The moment of transformation came when Brad whispered something intended only for Emma's ears, words designed to push her past the breaking point of self-control. His breath carried the mint and privilege that seemed to define everything about Riverside Prep's elite, but his message carried pure malice about her father's military service and the circumstances of his death. The personal attack crossed lines that even Emma's iron discipline couldn't ignore. What happened next would later be analyzed frame by frame in the dozens of videos captured by student phones. Emma's response was so fast that most observers missed the technical brilliance of her counterattack, seeing only the result. Brad Wellington suspended in midair for a moment that seemed to last forever, before crashing to the gymnasium floor with a sound that echoed through the suddenly silent fitness center. The throw itself was textbook perfect, utilizing Brad's own momentum and body weight against him while requiring minimal effort from Emma. In legitimate competition, it would have scored maximum points for technical execution and dramatic effect. In the context of a high school gymnasium demonstration, it looked like devastating violence unleashed by someone with terrifying capabilities. Brad lay motionless for several heartbeats, his designer athletic wear twisted and his carefully styled hair disheveled from the impact. When he finally moved, it was with the slow, uncertain motions of someone whose worldview had just been physically shattered, along with his assumption of invulnerability. The students surrounding the sparring circle stared in stunned silence, processing the impossible reversal they'd just witnessed. Coach Barnes' reaction revealed everything about the institutional corruption that Emma was beginning to understand. Instead of checking on either student's condition or acknowledging that his poorly supervised demonstration had escalated beyond safety limits, his first words were directed at Emma with accusatory venom. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Rodriguez?" The question hung in the air like an indictment, immediately establishing the narrative that would follow. Despite Brad's obvious escalation, despite the coach's failure to maintain control, despite the clear evidence that Emma had been defending herself against increasingly aggressive attacks, she was being framed as the aggressor whose violence had disrupted the peaceful academic environment. Emma stood over Brad's prone form, breathing steadily while her mind raced through the implications of what had just occurred. She'd kept her promise to herself by not intentionally hurting anyone, but she'd also revealed capabilities that would transform her from rumored threat into confirmed danger in the minds of everyone who mattered at Riverside Prep. The careful facade of normalcy she'd been trying to maintain lay shattered on the gymnasium floor alongside Brad's dignity. Around the circle, phones continued recording as students processed the shocking reversal of their expected entertainment. They'd come to watch a scholarship student be humiliated by their golden boy athlete, but instead they'd witness the systematic demolition of everything they thought they knew about power dynamics and physical dominance. The videos spreading across social media would tell a very different story than the one they'd planned to document. Emma Rodriguez stood in the center of that gymnasium circle, feeling the weight of 37 pairs of eyes cataloging every breath, every micro-expression, every subtle shift in her posture. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap, pregnant with the kind of tension that preceded either violence or revelation. She could hear Brad Wellington's labored breathing behind her, could sense Coach Barnes calculating how to spin what had just occurred, could feel the smartphone cameras dissecting her reaction for future analysis and judgment. This was the moment she'd been dreading since walking through Riverside Prep's pristine doors. The inevitable collision between who she really was and who she'd been trying to pretend to be. For years, Emma had perfected the art of hiding in plain sight, of blending into backgrounds and avoiding the kind of attention that revealed uncomfortable truths about her capabilities. That careful camouflage lay in ruins on the gymnasium floor, alongside Brad's assumptions about his own invincibility. The smart play would have been immediate apology, frantic explanations about accidents, and reflexes beyond her control. Emma had watched enough scholarship students navigate these treacherous social waters to understand the expected script: contrition, deference, and desperate assurance that such disruptions would never happen again. The unwritten rules of places, like Riverside, demanded that outsiders who revealed inconvenient truths about power structures must immediately minimize their own actions to preserve the comfortable fiction that wealth equaled strength. Instead, Emma turned slowly to face Coach Barnes, her movements deliberate and controlled despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. Her voice, when she finally spoke, carried none of the apologetic submission that everyone expected. "You asked for a demonstration of self-defense techniques," she said with crystalline clarity that cut through the gymnasium's stunned atmosphere. "Brad escalated beyond the safety parameters you established. I responded appropriately to neutralize a threat." The clinical precision of her language hit the assembled students like a psychological slap. This wasn't the panicked reaction of someone who'd accidentally revealed dangerous tendencies, but the calm assessment of a trained fighter who understood exactly what had occurred and felt no shame about her response. Emma's refusal to apologize or minimize her actions transformed the entire narrative from accident to deliberate demonstration of superior capability. Coach Barnes' face cycled through multiple shades of red as he processed the implications of Emma's statement. His carefully constructed plausible deniability crumbled in the face of her direct acknowledgement that his supervision had been inadequate and his safety protocols ignored. "That was completely unnecessary force," he sputtered, his voice carrying the outrage of someone unaccustomed to having his authority questioned by scholarship students. "Was it?" Emma's response carried genuine curiosity, as if she were conducting an academic discussion rather than defending herself against accusations of excessive violence. "Brad outweighs me by 60 pounds and has 4 inches of reach advantage. He ignored multiple signals to reduce his aggression level. At what point does self-preservation become unnecessary force?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything Riverside Prep represented. Emma wasn't just defending her physical response. She was questioning the fundamental assumptions that allowed people like Brad to escalate situations without consequences while expecting their victims to absorb punishment with grateful silence. Her words forced everyone present to confront the reality that their golden boy had been systematically increasing his aggression against someone half his size. Ashley Kim recovered first from the collective shock, her social media instincts recognizing opportunity in the chaos. "Did you see how fast she moved?" she announced to no one in particular while her fingers flew across her phone screen. "That wasn't self-defense. That was like watching a professional fighter destroy some amateur. She could have killed him." The observation was intended as condemnation, but Emma heard it as confirmation of something she'd been trying to hide. Ashley had inadvertently revealed the truth that Emma's restraint throughout the week hadn't been weakness but incredible self-control. Every moment she'd endured taunts and provocations without responding had been a choice, not inability to defend herself. Connor Hayes stepped closer to where Brad was slowly regaining his feet, his voice pitched to carry across the gymnasium. "This is exactly what everyone's been warning about. We all heard the stories from Phoenix, but seeing it happen." He let the implication hang unfinished, allowing imagination to fill in whatever dramatic conclusion best served his narrative. Emma recognized the coordinated nature of their response. This wasn't spontaneous outrage, but tactical communication, designed to control how the incident would be reported and remembered. They were already constructing the official version of events, one that would minimize Brad's escalation while maximizing the perceived threat. Emma represented to the school community. You want to know what really happened in Phoenix? Emma's voice cut through their orchestrated discussion with the authority of someone no longer interested in hiding uncomfortable truths. The gymnasium fell silent again, as students processed the implications of her apparent willingness to address the rumors directly. She pulled out her phone with movements so controlled they bordered on theatrical, each gesture calculated for maximum impact on her growing audience. The device contained digital proof of everything they'd been spreading lies about, documentation that would either vindicate her completely or confirm their worst fictional fears. Emma's finger hovered over the screen while she watched Coach Barnes, face pale with the realization that his carefully managed situation was spiraling beyond his control. I competed in sanctioned amateur mixed martial arts tournaments from age 14 to 16, Emma announced with the clarity of someone reciting court testimony. My record was 37 wins, 2 losses with 23 victories by submission. I was ranked second in my weight class in the Western United States before I retired from competition. The confession hit the assembled students like a physical blow. This wasn't the vague underground fighting references they'd been spreading, but specific, verifiable achievements that transformed Emma from rumored criminal into documented elite athlete. The distinction mattered because it meant her capabilities were legitimate, legal, and far more extensive than even their exaggerated stories had suggested. I've never been arrested for assault, Emma continued, her voice gaining strength as she dismantled their fictional narrative piece by piece. I've never been expelled from any school. I've never put anyone in a hospital outside of sanctioned competition where medical personnel were present and injuries were part of the accepted risk. Brad Wellington had finally regained his footing, though his designer athletic wear remained twisted and his face showed the kind of confusion that came from having fundamental assumptions about reality challenged. That's impossible, he muttered, though his voice lacked the conviction that had characterized his earlier taunts. Girls don't fight like that. Scholarship kids don't have that kind of training. Emma's smile held no warmth as she recognized the core prejudices driving Brad's disbelief. His worldview couldn't accommodate the possibility that someone from her economic background might possess advantages he lacked, or that gender might not determine fighting capability in ways his privileged upbringing had taught him to expect. Would you like me to demonstrate any other techniques? Emma asked with conversational politeness that made her offer sound like discussing homework assignments rather than potential violence. I'm particularly proficient in joint manipulation and pressure point applications. Very educational for a self-defense curriculum. The threat was delivered so calmly that it took several seconds for its implications to register with her audience. Emma wasn't apologizing or backing down. She was escalating by offering to provide additional demonstrations of capabilities that had already left their star athlete looking foolish and defeated. Her confidence suggested that what they'd witnessed was barely a sample of what she could accomplish when properly motivated. Coach Barnes finally found his voice, though it carried none of his usual authority. That's enough, Rodriguez. You need to report to Principal Foster's office immediately. This kind of behavior is completely unacceptable in our learning environment. Which behavior specifically? Emma's question forced him to articulate exactly what rules she'd violated, a challenge that revealed the selective nature of Riverside Prep's disciplinary standards. Defending myself against escalating aggression, responding to direct physical threats, or refusing to pretend that what happened was somehow my fault. The coach's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. As he struggled to identify specific violations that wouldn't implicate his own failure to maintain proper supervision, Emma had maneuvered him into a position where any accusations against her would require acknowledging that he'd allowed the situation to escalate beyond safe parameters. Around them, Students continued recording everything, their phones capturing not just Emma's physical capabilities, but her intellectual dominance over adults, who were supposed to represent authority and wisdom. The videos spreading across social media would show more than unexpected fighting skills. They would document a systematic dismantling of the power structures that kept places like Riverside Prep functioning. Emma gathered her belongings with the same controlled precision she displayed throughout the confrontation, each movement radiating the kind of confidence that came from no longer hiding essential truths about herself. The mask of normalcy she'd worn for the past week lay abandoned on the gymnasium floor, replaced by something far more dangerous to the school's carefully maintained social order. As she walked toward the exit, Emma paused at the doorway and turned back to address the silent room. "For anyone wondering about the stories from Phoenix," she said with perfect calm, "they weren't nearly dramatic enough. But you're about to find out what happens when someone stops pretending to be harmless." The promise hung in the air like smoke from a fired weapon, transforming Emma Rodriguez from victim of their rumors into architect of their coming destruction. Principal Foster's office felt smaller when occupied by someone who refused to be intimidated. Emma sat across from the mahogany desk with the posture of someone attending a business meeting rather than facing disciplinary action, her spine straight and hands folded calmly while the administrator struggled to maintain her usual psychological advantage. The power dynamic had shifted fundamentally since their previous conversation, and both women understood that the game being played had new rules. The videos from the gymnasium had exploded across social media, platforms with the viral intensity that only genuine shock could generate. Within 2 hours of the incident, Emma's perfectly executed throw had been viewed over 50,000 times across Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat, with comments ranging from admiration to terror. The narrative Brad's crew had spent weeks constructing about dangerous criminals attending Riverside Prep had become reality, just not in the way they'd intended. "Miss Rodriguez," Principal Foster began, her voice carrying the measured tone of someone walking through a minefield of legal implications, "we need to discuss the serious nature of what occurred during today's physical education class." She gestured toward a laptop displaying frozen frames from multiple student videos, each showing Emma in mid-throw with Brad suspended helplessly in the air. Emma studied the images with professional detachment, noting the technical precision of her form even in cell phone footage. "Those demonstrate textbook execution of a basic hip toss," she observed conversationally. "Coach Barnes requested a self-defense demonstration. I provided one that effectively neutralized an aggressor who'd exceeded the established safety parameters." The clinical language forced Principal Foster to confront uncomfortable facts about her star athlete's behavior while simultaneously acknowledging Emma's superior technical knowledge. Every word had been chosen to shift responsibility from Emma's response to Brad's initial escalation, creating a legal framework that would complicate any disciplinary action against her. "Several students have expressed concerns about feeling unsafe in your presence," Principal Foster continued, opening a folder thick with what appeared to be formal complaints. "These incidents of intimidation and threats of violence cannot be tolerated in our academic environment." Emma leaned forward slightly, her movement controlled and purposeful. "I'd like to review those complaints," she said with the authority of someone familiar with legal procedures. "Specifically, I want to see documentation of any threats I've made, along with witness statements and timestamps for when these alleged incidents occurred." The request caught Principal Foster off guard, revealing that the complaints were likely fabricated or exaggerated beyond recognition. Emma's calm insistence on examining evidence forced the administrator to either produce documentation that probably didn't exist or admit that the accusations were based on rumors and speculation rather than verified facts. "The specifics aren't as important as the overall pattern of disruptive behavior," Principal Foster said, attempting to deflect from Emma's demand for concrete evidence. Your presence has created an atmosphere of fear and anxiety among our student body, has it? Emma's question carried genuine curiosity along with subtle challenge. Because the only documented violence in this situation was Brad Wellington's escalating aggression during a supervised class activity. The only threats have been rumors spread by students who've never spoken directly to me. The only disruption has been administrative failure to address systematic harassment. Each point was delivered with prosecutorial precision, transforming Emma from defendant into prosecutor in a conversation that was supposed to result in her expulsion. Principal Foster found herself defending institutional decisions rather than addressing student misconduct, a reversal that revealed how unprepared Riverside Prep was for someone who understood legal frameworks and refused to accept blame for others' actions. The phone on Principal Foster's desk rang with increasing frequency as they spoke, each call likely representing another wealthy parent demanding explanations for why their children were attending school with someone capable of effortlessly overpowering their star athletes. Emma could hear muffled conversations through the walls as administrative staff fielded increasingly frantic inquiries about safety protocols and background screening procedures. We're prepared to offer you a transfer to a more suitable educational environment, Principal Foster finally announced, producing documents that had clearly been prepared in advance. Carson Valley High School has excellent academic programs and would better accommodate your particular needs and background. Emma recognized the offer as exile disguised as opportunity, a standard technique for removing problematic students without the legal complications of formal expulsion. Carson Valley was a public school 30 miles away in a working-class district, effectively ending any possibility of her accessing the elite college preparation resources that Riverside Prep provided. "And if I decline this generous offer?" Emma asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Then we'll be forced to implement additional security measures for the protection of our community," Principal Foster replied, her diplomatic language barely concealing the threat. Enhanced monitoring, restricted access to certain facilities, mandatory anger management counseling, and immediate suspension for any further incidents, regardless of circumstances. The systematic harassment disguised as safety protocols was designed to make Emma's daily existence so miserable that voluntary departure would seem preferable to enduring institutional persecution. Every class change would be monitored, every interaction scrutinized, every moment documented as potential evidence of future violations that would justify the expulsion they couldn't legally impose based on current circumstances. Emma stood with fluid grace, her movement causing Principal Foster to instinctively lean back in her chair, despite the desk barrier between them. "I'll need time to consider your offer," she said with perfect politeness that somehow managed to sound threatening. "In the meantime, I assume my legal right to education will be protected, and any further harassment by students or staff will be properly documented." The emphasis on documentation made Principal Foster's eye twitch as she realized that Emma wasn't just threatening to fight back, but to do so with the kind of systematic evidence gathering that could expose institutional failures to protect students from bullying and discrimination. The legal implications of poorly handled civil rights violations could devastate both careers and endowments. After leaving the principal's office, Emma discovered that her locker had been visited by persons unknown during her absence. Nothing was missing, but items had been rearranged in ways that suggested thorough searching, probably seeking evidence of weapons, drugs, or other contraband that could justify immediate expulsion. The invasion felt more violating than Brad's physical aggression because it represented institutional conspiracy rather than individual malice. The afternoon classes proceeded with Emma as the center of whispered conversations and surreptitious photography, but the dynamic had fundamentally changed from her first week at Riverside Prep. Students who'd previously ignored her now watched with a mixture of fear and fascination, recognizing that their previous assumptions about scholarship students and social hierarchies had been dramatically challenged by someone who refused to accept her assigned role as victim. Ashley Kim's latest social media campaign focused on demanding enhanced security measures, complete with carefully staged photos of herself looking vulnerable and afraid while walking through hallways where Emma might potentially appear. The post generated hundreds of sympathetic comments from followers who lived vicariously through the drama of wealthy teenagers facing imaginary threats from dangerous outsiders. Connor Hayes had organized a petition calling for Emma's immediate removal, gathering signatures from students whose parents would undoubtedly pressure the administration for decisive action. The document cited credible safety concerns and documented history of violence, while carefully avoiding specific accusations that could be verified or disproven through fact-checking. Even Sophia Chun, typically content to follow others' leads, had found her voice in condemning Emma's presence at their school. Her contribution was a detailed Instagram story describing how scholarship students with violent backgrounds threatened the safe learning environment that tuition-paying families deserve to expect from elite institutions. The coordinated nature of their response revealed sophisticated planning that extended beyond typical teenage social media drama. Someone with experience in crisis management and reputation destruction was orchestrating their campaign, possibly hired professionals skilled in making problems disappear through systematic character assassination and community pressure. Emma's phone buzzed constantly with notifications from social media platforms, where the gymnasium videos continued spreading beyond Riverside Prep's insular community. Mixed among the comments expressing shock or admiration were increasingly specific threats from anonymous accounts, messages that described her daily routine with accuracy that suggested local surveillance and monitoring. The most disturbing development was the appearance of her home address and her mother's work schedule in online forums dedicated to discussing the videos. Someone had conducted thorough research into her family's background, gathering information that could only have come from private investigative services or illegal data mining operations. Walking to her bus stop after school, Emma noticed the black sedan that had been parked across from the main entrance throughout the day. The vehicle's tinted windows and official-looking plates suggested either security personnel or private investigators, though their purpose remained unclear. The presence of professional surveillance indicated that her situation had escalated beyond high school drama into something requiring adult intervention and resources. Her phone rang as she waited for public transportation that would carry her back to a world where teenage fighting skills were survival necessities rather than social disruptions. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but Emma answered anyway, curious about who else might be interested in her developing situation. Emma Rodriguez? The voice was professionally neutral, carrying the kind of authority that suggested law enforcement or legal background. My name is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Marin County Sheriff's Department. We need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to our attention regarding your enrollment at Riverside Preparatory Academy. The call confirmed Emma's suspicions that her confrontation with Brad had triggered responses extending far beyond school disciplinary procedures. Someone with sufficient influence had convinced law enforcement to investigate her as a potential threat, transforming teenage conflict into criminal justice involvement that could affect her entire future. I assume this relates to today's gymnasium incident, Emma replied calmly, though her mind raced through implications of official police interest. I'm happy to provide a statement about what occurred during that supervised class activity. We'll need to schedule a formal interview, Detective Martinez continued, her tone suggesting this wasn't a voluntary request. There are also questions about your background and previous activities that require clarification for public safety purposes. Emma understood that she was being investigated as a dangerous individual whose presence threatened community welfare, despite having committed no crimes and violated no laws. The power of wealth and influence was being mobilized to transform Her from victim of harassment into subject of criminal scrutiny, using official resources to accomplish what school discipline couldn't achieve. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.